Welcome back to the table, everyone. I'm your host today, Alexis J. Soto, joined by your host today, Alexis J. Soto, joined by Mr. Peter Martinez, the showrunner of this show. Back from our extended hiatus of Tron Month, which I really enjoyed, and I'm sure Peter did as well, and hopefully you, the audience, did too. And now we're back for a highly anticipated horror-themed month. What kind of horror, Peter will get into momentarily. Just a reminder, you can catch our podcasts every Wednesday as they drop. So, Peter, would you like to take the reins as to what our listeners can be expecting for this month's batch of episodes, and also why you arrived at the particular theme? And people should realize Peter had a lot to work with in terms of like what theme we wanted to do for horror movies, because I think you only get to pick 3 or 4 for a month. So
yeah, at most 4. Well, as everyone knows, it is Ghosttober, the spookiest of spook seasons, and the 3 films this year, this Ghosttober, that we shall be discussing onto the table are all ghost films. And the reason for that was, why the fuck not? Get at my grill. Well, mostly because we had already decided to discuss the show The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor on the regular Red Spotlight. And then we were also going to do audio commentaries on, what was it, The Shining and Dr. Sleep. So we already had a ghost theme kind of going on, so I said, fuck it, let's just go ahead and continue it, and it'll help me narrow down more what exactly films I would pick specifically. So, as always, I attempt to pick films that the other individual that is part of the discussion would actually enjoy. I am not here to punish them. Yet. There might be in the future some that I would like to punish them with, but not today. Today, I picked a film to start off Ghost-tacular Tober awesomeness. I picked a film that I had assumed that Alexis would like, because it was produced, and maybe a little bit more than that, by...
It was co-written.
Yes, Stanley
Produced,
Kubrick.
Co-written.
Oh, co-written by Stanley Kubrick. We are, of course, talking about Poltergeist, 1992 film, officially, at least what it says on the film, directed by the master of horror, Tobe Hooper. Sorry, not Tobe Cooper, Tobe Hooper. He also, of course, was the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, yeah. Oh, that's the way. Before I ask you what you felt about the film, I should go ahead and do a little rundown on the film. Surprised if anyone hasn't heard of it yet. But here we go. Poltergeist, directed by Tobe Hooper. They're here. Steve Friedling lives with his wife Diane and their 3 children, Dana, Robbie, and Carol Ann, in Southern California. Oh, I've heard of that place. Where he sells houses for the company that built the neighborhood. It starts with just a few odd occurrences, such as broken dishes and furniture moving around by itself. However, when he realizes that something truly evil haunts his home, Steve calls in a team of parapsychologists led by Dr. Lesh to help before it's too late. So, Mr. Soto.
The movie was great. It was awesome. I loved it. You can continue with your remarks.
That's it?
Well, that's where we were starting off. I mean, if you want to get my initial impressions, that's what I felt.
Okay.
So, no, I mean, I don't like being put on the spot here.
What do you mean put on the spot? This is literally what we come to do.
I know. I don't know what else I can say. I found it to be highly entertaining. And yeah, we'll get into it as we discuss the movie.
Okay. I don't know. You're not selling me on the fact that you liked it, but okay. Why don't we start at the very beginning with this film, which is before the even film was made. Steven Spielberg. This film very much feels like a Steven Spielberg film. At least in my mind. When I watched it, it felt like a Spielberg film. But it's not officially directed by Steven Spielberg. It's directed by Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper is a good director. But ever since the movie came out, there has been rumors that Spielberg was behind the camera a lot more than let on. The crew basically came out and said, he was behind the camera a lot more than many would think. And also, I believe 1982. For why he wouldn't have just directed it himself, I don't know. I don't know if you did any research.
He wasn't
into that.
Making a movie at that point, was he?
I feel like he's always making movies, so I don't know, especially in the 80s. But why he wouldn't have, again, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, that's kind of the first stop with this film, is that it feels, whether it's true or not, that Spielberg actually directed a good chunk of this film, it feels like a Spielberg film for the most part.
Yeah, like that's one of the first things I can say.
Did you feel like, that?
Yes, I felt that very much so. When I found out that Tobe Hooper was a director of such works as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which a movie I would never see willingly or voluntarily, and that could be a future to the table at some point, because I still haven't seen it. Because why would I?
I'll say the film's very different than Poltergeist.
Well, that's what I was going to say, though. Like, I haven't seen the movie, but knowing from a lot of people should, I feel, cut me a little bit of a break here. When it comes to works like Poltergeist or The Wizard of Oz or some other things, look, a lot of these films are so inherent in pop culture and are so spoofed on by other works that follow. At some point, you're going to come across something in which you've basically already seen this movie, you just didn't know it. So, just leaving that out there. So, like with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I can probably, without having seen the movie, I can already kind of guess what that is. It's a slasher fest and stuff that I, as a kid, would not enjoy whatsoever.
It's a cultural osmosis, as I like to call it.
That's definitely a phrase for it. But this Poltergeist definitely didn't feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me. It definitely was the kind of horror story that I am interested in. With it, the whole supernatural effect. So that also may have, helped out your, I guess, line of thinking of like horror films that I would like, and that stuff I'm always interested in. But this, and I think I've known for a while that Steven Spielberg produced this movie as well as co-wrote the script, which is very unusual for him to do. He never writes a screenplay, much less directs.
I saw in the credits, I think it also said like story by. So he
the story idea was by
Yeah.
him, and then he co-wrote the script. There was a section, I think, in the Spielberg documentary where they talked about this particular time period, and how, you know, part of what influenced him to do this story was, as a child, he would constantly play scare pranks on his sisters. So that was kind of the inspiration to write this story. So that's as far as I know of, you know, kind of the origin of this. But nevertheless, it is very unusual. I think the circumstance of this, like his involvement, he co-wrote, he produced. Why wouldn't he then just direct? That's not necessarily like him, and you're right. Although, that being said, and from what I've seen, there have been contradictory positions about his full involvement with this. And this isn't, I think, not the first or last time that these kind of stories have followed Spielberg. I know that there are a whole bunch of like group of thought that believe that Spielberg helped George Lucas make Episode 3 or directed some scenes. I don't know what, I guess, evidence there is to suggest that, besides that Episode 3 is a better directed film than the other two, although by how much of a mile, I'm not so sure.
I was going to say,
I'm going to assume they mean maybe some of the individual scenes are better directed.
Maybe certain shots.
But perhaps, I don't know. Maybe that's something that George let him do, considering that Spielberg gave Lucas the reins to basically Indiana Jones 4. So maybe they were like, you give me one, I'll give you one. I don't know what happened there. But it is very interesting when I learned about who exactly Tobe Hooper was, and how this particular film, Poltergeist, is so unlike anything else that he's done, not just Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then when you also just take the movie at face value, it is just littered with the kind of stuff that Spielberg is known for. It felt very Spielberg, not only from, I think, the family, but the emphasis on like child actors, even just, I guess, the tone of it. Like he was, I think, going for something that I think would be scary for a particular demographic, not necessarily, I feel, over the top with it. I was hearing that he was fighting for that PG rating, because at that point there was only PG or R rating. There wasn't a PG-13 rating, which Spielberg himself did help create the PG-13 rating down the line. So, yeah, it's a very interesting film. And I didn't want to say too much at the beginning of it, because I just wanted to get straight into this, because I feel like a lot of it really gets us in a good place of understanding this movie. But you're right, though. It may as well be considered a Spielberg movie. This would be the only horror film beside, I think, Duel, I think, in his entire filmography, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Or films that he's worked on from a personal perspective.
Duel would strictly even fit under horror. Maybe thriller.
Right. Okay.
I'm trying to think what else. Jaws. How can you forget Jaws?
Oh, that's right. Jaws. Jaws.
It's literally the movie that made him.
That's right. So you have horror, Poltergeist, and you have Duel. Although Duel did come before Jaws. It was the TV film.
Duel was technically like his first film. But a TV film.
It was a TV movie that he basically was like, made it feel like a feature film.
Yeah. One of the things I like about this film, again, it's one of those films, and I really like films this way, where it starts right at the beginning of the action, and then once the action's done, the film ends. It doesn't fuck around with your time.
Well, that's very much of its time, I feel, though. Like that's isn't that the case? Because a lot of movies these days don't do that. You know, like the climax isn't the end. There's like a lot of padding. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of dialogue scenes that don't need to be in there. And this kind of reminds you, you don't always need that. In fact, in many cases, you'd be better off not needing that, you know?
Yeah. I love a tight film where it's just like you're thrown in, you experience it, and then it ends. And then it's like, great. Boom, 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 done. Awesome. The last film that I kind of saw like that was, and I really liked this one, the Crawl with the alligator. The alligators.
That was fun. That was good.
Yeah. Where it starts and it's like fucking alligators, you know? And then right as they're rescued, boom, done. See you later, alligator. That's it. And I'm like, awesome. Great. I came, I experienced it. See you later. And with this one, it's not only that, it's with a lot of things, right? So, cause like the first night that, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I promise I'll jump back. But like the first night where they experience shit really, really bad and the girl disappears, you would think there would show all of them like coping with it, and there'd be all of this build up to them finally talking to like paranormal investigators. But it literally goes from that night and then it cuts to the dad talking to the paranormal investigators. And there's just this implied, like, this has been going on for weeks, you know, but you don't show them like slowly, like losing it, talking to the cops that their daughter's missing, you know, like stumbling upon the paranormal research somewhere and then going to talk to them. It's literally just like they experienced it, boom, right next to, go right back to the paranormal investigator so you can get back to the ghosts. Which again, I actually appreciate just how compact and just tight the film is. I that's one of the things I enjoy about it, and I wish more movies were like that. But yeah, like going back,
I agree with you so much. Just letting people know there may be a delay. That's why we may be cutting into each other here, but that I think speaks to the era of filmmaking. Like I just, even the best of movies these days have issues with just getting to the gist of things, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think like there's this perception, I think, by modern day Hollywood, and again, what that is anymore in the age of COVID, who knows? But as far as like with like big movies or big blockbusters these days, there, the impression definitely is out there that, well, if you want a big movie, it's got to be 2 hours, 2:15, 2:20, 2.5. The length of the film, definitely, I think the average length of big movies has gotten longer and longer. I'm not even sure how long this movie is, Poltergeist, but it didn't feel long.
No,
if that's a good indication.
114 minutes, so it's not short, but it ain't like the 2.5 hour type shit that you see nowadays. Yeah, so the movie it literally begins with that the first contact of the ghosts with the little girl Carol Ann. And I was gonna look up her name, but I realized it had been burned into my mind with how much they scream it in the movie. Carol Ann.
I mean, literally.
Carol Ann.
Carol Ann.
Mommy. That's the whole fucking movie right there. That's the script. Yeah, it literally starts with them all asleep throughout through the night, you know, fall asleep in front of the TV, and then it does that thing that TVs don't really do anymore. Or do they? I don't even know.
No, they don't do that. What happened was at a certain point, so this was the early 80s. This is a time in which there were only really 3 big channels, 3 big networks, and once they conclude their broadcasting signal, like around like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, they cut off the signal, and that's why you literally cut to the TV doing that.
It's like a white noise
and then
type thing.
Yeah.
And then that's her talking to the little girl talking to the TV.
The TV
The
people.
TV people. Real pretty creepy shit. And I wanted to ask you this. Did you feel the film was trying to say anything political?
That's an interesting take. No. It didn't cross my mind. But now that you're saying, well, I do know that there is a frequent use of the Star Spangled Banner. They do play that, and then I also do know, and again, this I need to be completely transparent about this, because we had this discussion I think about a year ago when we were talking about The Shining, and I had asked a general conversation about how typical Indian burial grounds are in horror films. So a lot of the stuff that this movie is known for, I had been exposed to previously, so I knew kind of most of this movie before having seen the actual thing. I don't think it diminished it all that well, because I think the movie is just great on its own. I think it still works. Maybe I think it would have worked. I feel it would have been far more terrifying if I were a small child watching
definitely.
this. So there's that, but I found it to be great fun. I loved it. But that is an interesting aspect that you bring up, because we do have those two to piece it together. We have the Star Spangled Banner and then music. And we also have the fact that this house and this entire neighborhood is this American development built on top of a Indian burial ground. And of course, if you know your history, America's original sin was genocide of Native Americans.
It's the newly developed suburbs, the American dream. And not like the film literally starts, like you said, with the Star Spangled Banner. It's playing when Poltergeist pops up on screen. Every time before the TV, switches to white noise, it's the Star Spangled Banner with scenes of American patriotism before it instantly smash cuts to that white noise. The father, when they're in the bed, is reading a book about Ronald Reagan.
Yes. Oh my God. That moment stuck out to my mind. I didn't piece it together at that point. It just made me remember I hate Ronald Reagan.
Oh yeah.
That's all I was thinking
Every
at that
good
point.
person should.
But you're right.
But not only that, this is it's kind of a funny joke, but I'm like, this might imply something. Remember at the next morning at breakfast where little Carol Ann goes over to the little TV in the kitchen and turns it to white noise and just starts staring at it. And you're like, oh shit, what the fuck is she doing? But then the mom walks by and she's like, oh, don't do that. You're going to ruin your eyes. And switches it to like a World War II movie where they're like shooting and killing each other. Like, no, this is better.
I laughed at that, but I didn't think there was anything more to it than just like a funny like cut to.
Yeah. Bonjour.
As you were saying?
Yeah. So thinking about this film, as I was watching it, I noticed these things more prevalently for the very first time. And it got me thinking like, oh, like they just started popping out. And I'm like, I feel like this film is trying to be just a little bit more than just a spooky house in the suburbs type thing. I think the fact that it is the suburbs has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like that. And then also just the way it shows just how affluent they are, everyone around them, like the neighborhood, how everything's like, oh yeah, we got a jacuzzi in our spare room over here, and it's just like, oh, phase 4 and phase 5 of development, it's gonna be beautiful, and it's, yeah, and just the very overt, like you said, messaging of this wonderful paradise is literally built on top of graves, that kind of symbolism. So I think it has kind of a lot to say about the American dream and what it took to achieve that, and I don't think it was necessarily anything positive.
The way you spell it out now, it feels like it's a bit too intentional to be an accident. Has there been any on record questioning behind the creators about any of this?
I don't know. I did like a quick Google search and I didn't really get anything. I'd have to imagine if you dig for more than 5 seconds, like I didn't do, you'll probably find something. But I just feel like all of it is just too overt. The fact that the movie literally just starts with the blaring of the national anthem with Poltergeist title card just over it, like, and the way the film just ends with them escaping suburbia, and also the fact that the conduit is through the television, which
right is an American invention.
That was kind of, the TV set, that in of itself was really that came along with the whole American idealism of like the 1950s and onward. You know what I mean? Like, oh, everyone has a television and TV dinners and that whole boom after World War II and from the 1950s and 60s and onward. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty blatant, the political messaging of the film. I just never noticed it before.
That is so interesting. And I really do wonder, though, if perhaps why this doesn't get much recognition now. I don't know. This isn't anything that really is associated with the legacy of Poltergeist. I think most people just remember it as like, oh, that was a really cool, fun horror movie from the 80s.
They remember the tree.
And that's it.
They remember the clown. They remember they're here. Yeah. They were... they remember all that other stuff. But sort of the political insinuations, not really. But to be fair, I feel like that's most films. I've sadly come to realize most people don't consume film beyond the very, very top. They never go below the surface, just at the very, very top. Whatever they see at the top of the surface, they just take it at face value. Because there's so many films. Like I've said, I've seen people be like, oh, RoboCop isn't political. So many people claim that they're tired of politics in their films. And then when you ask them what their favorite films are, it's some of the most blatantly political films. And it's like, okay, why do you even like these films? Like, what do you see in them? So, it's par for the course, I guess.
As is our usual conversations, it seems like when we're analyzing movies. But no, I'm legitimately curious about this. And I'm tempted almost to stop this podcast and do an investigative report on what the hell the history of this is. Because, you do, I don't know why it didn't occur to me. I mean, because I watched the damn movie, but I guess I was more... concerned with the damn ghosts and the funness of it to even realize it. But those things did stick out. The Reagan thing in particular did stick out. I do remember the national anthem. You do remember the bodies coming out of the end of the movie. So maybe subconsciously I did get it, but that just wasn't, I think, where my attention was,
Yeah, first viewing, of course, you're gonna be like, "Oh fuck, there's a ghost." You know what? I say we do some research a bit. At the beginning of the next to the table, we have a little update.
Sure, that sounds fun. But yeah, that is a very interesting commentary.
Speaking of the dead bodies at the end, did you know at that time in Hollywood, they didn't use fake skeletons. They used real dead bodies. Which
there's a time for everything, isn't it?
Extremely ironic given the message of the film.
No. You're kidding me.
No.
You make a movie about the dangers of desecrating on land with dead people, and then you cast actual carcasses.
To be fair, that was like
as
par for the
props.
course for films, but still, this film in particular, that's pretty funny.
Those were actual bodies, and those actors literally, because there were scenes where one in particular was swimming in a pool with them.
Hollywood's a bitch, ain't it?
I would not be okay with that on any level.
I wouldn't either.
Wow.
But I'm not an actor, so.
I mean, this isn't entirely, I think, foreign. I mean, for people who know their Disney history, they all know that there was a real life skeleton inside the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction.
Yeah, back then, people just didn't give a shit.
He didn't.
He didn't.
Oh, yeah, we'll just use a real life skeleton.
I mean, it's there. What else is it going to do? It ain't coming back to life. I guess that was the thought process. So yeah, at the beginning of this film, first of all, I like the family.
Yes,
they're likable, you know. The mom smokes weed, so you know she's cool. The dad, you know, typical suburban dad, but he's not like a dick, because a lot of them can come off.
Can be.
Know, he seems nice enough dad. The young girl and the young son, cute. You know, the young Carol Ann, cute little girl. And the sister, you know, typical teenage daughter type character. But again, like she doesn't like hate her siblings. Like similar other stories would have her like, I hate my brother and I have to be around them. But like at the breakfast table, you know, she's goofing off with them, and it's like, it's a nice family. they're likable.
Yeah, and this may just be me. I'm not sure if you paid much attention to this as well. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that you liking this family makes you like this movie just that little bit more. There are a lot of horror films, a lot of haunted house movies where you probably wouldn't give a damn about the characters, and that may or may not, you know, come to a detriment with how much you like the movie. In some cases, if they're bad people, you're happy that they're being haunted and they're being disturbed. But in this case, you legitimately like them and therefore would not wish the things that they're about to go through. One of the things that I found interesting about this house was, and this is not something that I have come across with other movies, and this is key because this is 82. It felt like the most, so this is the early 80s, but it felt like a mix of early 80s, late 70s, like that transition period between the decades.
It is 80.
Know?
It did premiere 82, so I don't know at what time they started filming, but probably 81 or even 1980. So yeah,
right.
It would be pretty early on, that sort of transition period.
And I think it's just weird because you don't really see it all that much, even in like period film. That's like when you go see a period film, it's like, okay, let's get everything 80s as it was in the heart of the 80s. But you don't really see much in like the end of that decade or in the beginning of the decade, those transitional moments, because we're living through one right now. We're transitioning through a real life in between of decades with the 2010s and the 2020s. And
I was going to say the kid littered with Star Wars toys.
That's another thing that I found interesting is, and I wonder if this movie had been made today, Disney would not have allowed
No, of course not. But, at the time, George and Spielberg were friends, so of course he's going to throw in all the Star Wars figures in the back and stuff.
There was a lot of them. There was I caught Darth Vader. I think it was a Darth Vader clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. He had a poster.
There was a Yoda. There was Yoda next to him. He had a Yoda teddy bear or something, like Yoda plush or something. There was a big poster, you're right, the Star Wars poster on there. So, and at that point, this would have been post Empire Strikes Back. Pre Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. It would be in the middle of the whole, really, Star Wars craze.
Uh-huh.
So that's another.
And even, the haircuts. You have, I think, the classic...
bowl.
Would that be bowl cut for the little boy, and then you also for Carol Ann you have that
longer bowl cut.
That felt very the longer. Well, that felt there are similarities, but it felt like Brady Bunch.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting to see Craig T. Nelson as a young man. I usually know of him in his work.
Yeah,
recently.
when he's older. I always think of him as the crazy coach from Blades of Glory. Have you seen that movie?
I think I have, but it's been such a long time,
With Will Ferrell, where they're skaters. Because all I really know him of is like his later work, where he's like comedic and he's fucking crazy and it's funny. But yeah, to see him that
Mr.
young.
Incredible.
Oh yeah, and Mr. Incredible, of course, yeah. But no, here he's great. I like him. He does a good job.
Yeah, no, they're all really good. But no, the house in and of itself, and I think besides just the interesting transitional eras, but very good use of your production design. As we're gonna be reviewing the next couple of weeks, your haunted house stories need some good houses. You need some interesting, a playground here to use in. And I think they used it really well for very different effects. Like you have the staircase that's used for the introduction of some ghosts. And then most importantly, you have the hallway for one really, really cool effect toward the end. But mainly you have the little girl in the little boy's room, Carol Ann in her brother's room, which a lot of freaky stuff happens there. And before the supernatural elements begin, there's some interesting. I knew they were going to pull some shit with that clown.
Oh yeah.
At one point, because they kept going back to it, they kept teasing it, and like, you fuckers, you're gonna get me when that happens. When it get to that point, and the tree. Damn, I really wish this is one of those cases where I really wished I wouldn't have picked it up from other places, because that would have been a really surprising moment, but it was still exhilarating, just like the fucking tree bursting through the window.
What I like about this movie, as far as what makes it different from other ghost stories, is it just goes for crazy shit, Yeah. Like almost fantasy levels where, you have the kid where at first you're like, oh, he's kind of scared of the tree outside. And you don't expect the tree to literally fucking come alive, grab him and start swallowing him whole. You're like, what the fuck? Ghosts aren't supposed to
much less getting
this.
Getting pulled away by a tornado out of nowhere.
A magic tornado comes out of nowhere that literally affects no one else on the street. Of course the clown, but then all the shit in the room or everything just flying everywhere. There's several ghosts, that weird white ghost with the hands. Oh, I will say the last year when I went to Halloween Horror Nights, they had a Poltergeist maze. Yes. I'm sure if you look it up on YouTube, you'll find a walkthrough of it. Right. It was pretty cool. I really liked it. And they had that, like, the closet, and it would open up, and then, like, the white thing, like, rah. Yeah, it kind of was more along the lines of, like, Ghostbusters than other horror films of that time, I think.
Right.
Which is interesting, because this isn't played as a comedy, it's played more straight. With, of course, you know, small comedic moments. Like, my favorite comedic moment was when they finally get the parapsychological ghost hunters to come to the house. And they're like, we have the top experts. And, you know, the dad just looks done. Like, his face, you could tell he hasn't been sleeping. And they're like, can we go see, you know, the room? And he's like, yeah, okay. And then before they enter the door, they're just like, oh, yeah, this guy here, he's the best. And he starts bragging about, like, yeah, with my camera, I caught, you know, a small race car slide across the room, you know. It took 8 hours. And he's like, 8 hours? The dad's like, 8 hours? He's like, yes, we used our speed up camera to be able to see it move. It was extraordinary. And he's just like, yeah, okay. And then opens the door. It's just fucking everything is flying everywhere. The whole room is just mania. Like, yeah, your race car, that's so interesting. My house is fucking The Exorcism times 100 right now.
That was a hilarious scene. As always, I think you and I come at it from a very similar place where we are very appreciative of old time effects, but we can always be honest in cases in which certain effects have really not aged all that well. In that particular scene, it was I think the most effects heavy scene in the movie, where it didn't look all that great.
Which one? That scene?
Where they open the door and you see the things flying around. There's this one instance where there's I think a lamp comes together. Mm-hmm. They really focus on that.
If it was like more far away, it wouldn't have been that bad, but like they get up real close and you can really tell like it's kind of cut outlined and like yeah, definitely an 80s film. Definitely. So yeah, the movie mainly revolves around trying to get back Carol Ann, because Carol Ann was stolen, taken into the afterlife, or the in between. They actually have
the other side.
A bit of explaining about how everything works within the world of that.
And you know, to your point earlier, those scenes in movies these days are always the least fun.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they can cause the film to slow and drag for, exposition dumping. And I didn't feel that way about how they handle it in this movie. I felt very intrigued and very interested in, and it may just be in terms of how they were talking about it. Like, I think later in the movie, when they get the final boss, not the final boss, the final player, what's her name? The small woman.
Oh, yeah.
The expert to come in, and then her automatically just translating basically ghost into English and really kind of like catching everybody up on, oh, okay, this is what's going on. But her performance and the dialogue that she's given, I think sells it more than just, oh, this is the part where they're giving us exposition. They didn't really tell you much of anything. I mean, you kind of already pieced it together, like where Carol Ann Ford is or in what kind of space that she's in. But I think what's most interesting is how that actress and that character describes the kind of, I guess, paranormal activity that's going on.
Yeah, she's she's really fascinating. She's entertaining. So whenever she was talking and discussing everything, I was like entertained to say the least. Like one of my favorite things is when they do finally get Carol Ann back and they're recording it. She like she gets the camera to her and she turns, she flips her hair and she's like, "This house is clean." Like she's just an interesting character. So to see her talk and explain things, she naturally drew me in. So yeah, when there was all this sort of, I guess you could call it info dump, it didn't really bother me. And plus I feel you needed some answers just to be like, okay, well, how are you going to get her back? You know, what is the strategy? What can you do? What can't you do? Have you seen Insidious?
Of course.
Yeah.
I loved it. We talked about this, I think. Yeah.
It reminds me of that film a lot. The first one.
Yeah.
Where they talk, I can't remember what it's called, what they call it in the film, but when they bring that one lady in and she's like...
Right. She was also really good.
Yeah. I think that's why it worked in that film here, and of course it works here as well. So no, I liked all that. There was...
It was just so, real quick, a little bit more on that. Like, well, I think part of it, what drew me in, especially in like, first of all, from like in terms of like, you know, scene dressing and kind of setting the stage together, what was so interesting in terms of how she was describing the activity that was going on is she was kind of describing it in a little bit of a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And then she drops the bomb when she's like, all right, now gather yourselves for this next bit. There's some evil shit in this house that's going to kill everything. So I thought that was hilarious in terms of how she like, all right, we'll give you the good stuff first and then we'll get to the really, really, really bad things that's going on. But, yeah, it was interesting to say the least of like the stuff that's going on of like, the one I forget what her name was, but the other woman that they first go to for the majority of the second act, she gets a lot of screen time, back and forth with the mom and then the boy, just talking about the things that she's experienced and the things that she knows, which further I think build with the other woman they bring in the third act and for all the action that happens therefore. I did notice that there were, I guess the second act is seemingly everyone's least favorite, although I was really captivated by the conversations being had.
Wait, do people think it's like slow or...
Well, let me just give you an example. Yeah, basically, I was watching Chris Stuckman's review of it, and he was saying that people over time have felt that way about the second act, that it was like it was just the least interesting and not much action happens.
Really?
As compared to the first and third act. Yeah.
I feel like there was a good bit. Yeah, you do have a lot of discussions, which I do think are important because I feel as if this film actively needs you to care about this family and their plight to get their daughter back. Like actively care. But you have the one cameraman who rips off his face in a hallucination.
That
with that good 80s makeup gore effects.
Well, you have the ghosts coming down the staircase and being captured on the camera.
And that's really interesting. When they play back and you can look closely and notice like, oh, they're people, you know, walking. And they're discussing like, oh, lost souls, you know, what could have happened? All that. And also seeing the family kind of fall apart. I don't know. I found it... I never felt like this movie slowed down that much. In fact, I found it to be a rather fast-paced film.
Right. That also struck me when I heard it, and I'm exactly on your page as well. If anything, I actually preferred what was being done in the second act. I think I mean, if I'm being honest with you, this is one of those cases where I find very little to be critical of
Yeah, no, I don't.
as a film overall.
For what it's trying to be, I feel like it it hits all those marks. Well, I guess here's the question. And again, I kind of don't care. Did you find the film scary?
I feel like I'm I've acquainted myself enough with this. I think it also helps that I watched Hill House before
Yeah.
this, so I think that kind of broke me in a little bit more in terms of like expecting this stuff. So if but I'm not comparing it to Hill House because it's just not fair. I'm just on its own merits. What is the film scary? Not necessarily. Well, it is, but does that scare me? No, not as much. There were moments that I think my terminology on horror stuff may not be as clear as yours. There were moments where they do a little bit of a these surprise jump scares that get you, or like these cutaways that like spook you. So I was spooked for moments. I'll tell you specifically. So when they do that scene where where the chairs in the beginning, so the mom is rearranging the chairs after they've been pulled away, and then she's looking underneath the counter, and then when she looks back up with the camera following her, then she's like spooked back when she sees all the chairs stacked on the table. That was creepy as shit. Just the fact that even in the beginning of the film, when Carol Ann walks down the stairs to the TV in front of her father, and she's saying, and she's laughing and having a conversation with something in the TV, and then everyone walks down the stairs and nothing is said. I was like, oh shit. I'm glad that nothing was said, because it felt, I think, even creepier. And then the fact that the next day everyone was like, that didn't happen. Let's just move on with our lives. You know, we're just going to internalize this shit and move on. The clown.
Oh, fuck that clown.
Because I know, right? It was so hideous, but how it's used where the boy is like looking every which direction, and then he's looking under the bed both ways, like left, right, and then it just pops out of nowhere and like grabs him.
It literally like freaking muzzles him with his hand, drags him under the bed. I was like, oh fuck, what's this clown gonna do to this boy? I
know, right? Like, it was creepy. When the mom is one of the creepy moments is when the dog was barking at the ceiling.
Yeah.
That's kind of bone chilling, because like we didn't discuss this in the Hill House stuff, but like, because we've all heard paranormal stories of people who see things. Dogs see a lot of things that we don't.
Apparently,
see.
animals all have the sixth sense that
it
humans
seems that
don't.
Way.
Speaking of sixth sense, tune in next week to the table.
When the mom is being picked up by that particular ghost.
Oh shit!
And is on this sticking to the
lot
ceiling.
Of rapey ghosts going on in this house. What's up with that?
They weren't afraid of any touchy-feely hands. Let's be real about that. And then I think the one that is just horrifying, I think made even more horrifying now that what you just told me, is the graves.
Oh yeah,
popping up everywhere.
That the actress to the mother, she earned her paycheck. She earned that shit. Poor woman. Like, they show her take a shower meticulously, so clean, and then
I know.
a minute later, she's in a pool of mud and dead bodies. Definitely needed another shower after that. Totally ruined the first one. Yeah, see, this is the thing. This film to me isn't scary, right? But I don't know. I don't care. I feel like for a lot of people, and this might be weird, right? You would expect the number one metric for a quote unquote horror film is that if it's scary. But this is how I feel. Genres are a social construct. Genres are just things we created to make it easier to categorize certain stories, but like
just to put labels, because we're so obsessed with labels.
But genres don't really mean anything, right? Because genres are just sort of a collection of tropes that we're able to compartmentalize and, you know, understand like, oh, okay, this genre is similar, you know, this film is similar to this film because it follows these particular tropes and it's attempting to maybe do this, so it falls under this genre and da-da-da-da. But there are a lot of films out there that just don't fit a particular genre, right? And you'll see now, I feel like the way a lot of people judge films is they'll say genres are supposed to be these collections of tropes, and if you do not follow the exact collection of tropes, then you failed making a good film. When it's like, well, no, the films came before the tropes. You know, the art existed before the labeling of any sort of genre. Genres came after when we noticed like, hey, a lot of these stories are pretty similar. Let's, you know, think of a word for them to put together. It's sort of like race, like races, right? Races aren't this like fact of the world. What happened is people just sort of noticed like, oh, these people have similar skin color, so we'll group them together, and these other people's, they have similar skin color, so we're gonna group them together. But it's like this. if you have a skin color that's kind of like if you're mixed, right? Like Obama, people don't say like, oh, he's a failure because he doesn't fit into the right race. It's like, well, no, races came first, and then we just not races came first. People with different skin colors came first, and then we just sort of use race to generalize grouping of them. And it's the same with movies. Genres are just sort of generalized groupings. So you'll have people that might say like, well, this comedy didn't make me laugh out loud at all, so it's a shit comedy. And I can go like, well, maybe me neither. I never laughed out loud at the film, but it's really good anyways. You know, the story's really good, the way it's told. Maybe it only ever caused me to chuckle here and there, but the overall artistic package is really good. But then people will go like, well, it's a comedy. You didn't laugh, so that ergo it's a bad comedy. And it's like, well, and then not only ergo it's a bad comedy, ergo it's a bad movie. And it's like, that's not really the way it works. I guess if that's the way you judge it, but that's not really the way it works. And that's the same thing with me with horror. There are horror films that have really scared me, but overall, they're probably bad films. I would consider them to be bad films. But there are films that I've never found scary that are technically under the genre of horror that I just feel are so well put together and entertaining and exciting, and I really enjoy watching them, that I'm like, yeah, it's a great film. And even great horror film. The atmosphere, you know. Sorry, am I boring you? I went off on a little...
No, I'm listening very intently, and I agree with you. I mean, I feel like this kind of happens when we talk about genre, but it definitely does need to be said. And it's a welcome distraction from reality, so I am very captivated by your commentary.
Well, that being said, because that is, if I see the negatives of people talk about the film, they'll say that, like, and it wasn't even scary. First of all, to a child, I think it would be terrifying.
Oh, yes. This is probably the reason why I didn't watch it as a kid. So,
and then second of all, like, that's not really the metric by which I judge films completely.
Right.
It might be
right.
one of them, but it's not, yeah, the film is, I found really, really good. When we talk about the way it ends, not to say the discussion of the film is necessarily over, but the way it ends, and it just sort of like, okay, we're done. The story's done, so now we're done. I love how it ends. They don't even speak to each other, right? There's no discussion between the family. It's just all hell breaks loose. They get in the car and get the fuck out of there. They're not talking to each other on the car ride. When they get to the hotel, they're not talking to each other. They're just kind of like done, And then just that one last little joke where they throw the TV out before they close the door and just get rest for the first time in months. It's so great. It's just like a little, period, that little joke where they throw the TV out, shut the door, and then go to credits. It's just so perfect. The little period, and then boom, the story's over. And then also, you never know what the evil is, which is also something I found interesting. Because they kept saying, oh, there's a great evil in this house. There's good souls and lost souls, but there's an evil, and we don't know the evil. Again, actually, this is really similar to Insidious. Now that I think about it, because it's like a kid that's lost on the other side, and then you have the certain lady come in and be like, remember when we talked about spiritual sequels?
We
Here's
are.
another one. But with that film, they did show like the evil. It was Darth Maul.
Yeah.
But with this one, they didn't even show it. They're just implied there's an evil on the other side. I guess they kind of show it with like that giant skull. Remember that like pops out of the closet? I don't know if that was technically, I assume maybe that's what the evil was. But yeah, no.
That's a good question. I guess it just assumed that the haunting was, or the people who were doing the haunting were the Native American souls.
Well, that's what's cool. You know how we talked about explaining things only when they need to be explained? They didn't need to know who the evil was. Once they got their daughter and shit, and they got the fuck out of there. It's like, okay, bye. We're done. No mas. The story's over, The Poltergeist is over. There was no need to really create this villain, and it's the demon. Demons always have funny names. Genochi or whatever. I don't know. The Wendigo. Pazuzu. But yeah, again, it's one of those things where I love the film. It just starts, it goes, you learn what you have to know and not anything more. You never see the other side, so to speak. It's just very Ghostbusters. They go through the other side and they come back covered in goo.
Yeah.
It's fun. I really like this film.
No, yeah, and look, it was I loved how it kept building and building and building. And it almost catches you a little bit off balance where right after where the woman goes, "This house is clean," and they're packing up, and you think to yourself, "Wait, is this movie over?"
Yeah, there's a fake out ending.
Are we done? Right, and then it. But then it goes on too long, and then you think, "Oh no,
the house ain't clean."
No, this movie ain't over yet, and it saves some of its best stuff for the end. That last bit of action was electric, where it literally just hits the fan in every which direction. Of course, you mentioned we mentioned so much of it already, but this is part of the stuff in which you had that hallway effect.
Oh yeah, where it stretched out like it was running forever. Yeah. Which that's like a a classic Spielberg move. That's the I don't know what the name of it is, but I think it's like when you pull the camera back while zooming in with the camera at the same time. And that's the famous shot he used in Jaws when it's like
That's right.
the guy like
Yes.
you know. And they also used it in Goodfellas to much lesser effect in the diner scene when when what's his name has already been caught and he's talking to Robert De Niro, and De Niro's basically like, "Oh, hey, I got a job for you," you know. And it's like, that's when I knew if I went I would have been whacked. And I remember behind the scenes hearing that they did it just like ever so slightly though, like just slowly panning out and then slowly zooming in just to add a level of unease, you know what I mean, like a subconscious unease to the whole meeting.
Right.
So no, it's a really cool effect, and I love when it's used.
It is and it definitely helped out the creep factor of what's going on, but it's just hilarious. Like I mean it's just I find it hilarious. Just like the house literally explodes,
like the
and like the
dead bodies, just the graves just start like exploding out of the ground and all over. And what's so great about this movie, again, that I find different than other ghost stories, is the ghosts don't give a fuck who sees, right? Because other ghost stories, it's like they're legit trying to hide their power levels or something. So, you know, people go crazy like, I saw that, and then, you know, you go back and look at the footage, like there's nothing there. Like basically a lot of ghost stories is just trying to get people to believe you, and ghosts are like very subtle, you know, is not to expose themselves, but these ghosts don't give a fuck. You know, on the first night shit goes crazy, you know, they're just out and about, they're constantly throwing shit all over the room and giggling, they don't care who sees. And then at the end the house literally just fucking implodes into nothingness, and like literally the whole town watches, and it's just like I guess ghosts are real now, guys. I don't know how this whole block is gonna explain it, but yeah. I like how these ghosts just had big dick energy, where it's like, we are ghosts and we do not care who sees. And then also, I can't remember the exact definition. They said it when they were talking to the ghost hunters, where they're like, there's a haunting and then there's a poltergeist. And a haunting, I believe, revolves around a place, and it can go on for years and years and years. But a poltergeist surrounds a person, and it's very sudden, and it can end at any moment, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. I didn't know that was like a thing, a word. I just thought it was just another word for haunting. But, oh, I thought that was cool. Cool.
We shouldn't forget to mention the wonderful, wonderful score by Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah, music's great. Again, very, very very Steven. Very Spielberg. I'm telling you, the film feels like a long-lost Steven Spielberg film. It really comes off like that. It's very Gremlins. You know what I mean?
Which he didn't direct, but he produced.
There's another one.
Right? Right.
I think that was Joe Dante.
Another one of
those.
those.
That one.
Uh-huh.
But yeah. No. Spielberg, he really did control Hollywood there for a good bit.
Yeah.
That's great. That's so crazy how these legends that once just ran the industry are now like Can anyone finance my films? Please and thank you.
He's the only one that has no problem though financing his personal movies. Has he had? He always gets the money to do whatever he wants. He's the only one that
I
can't
remember
finance
which projects, but there was something along the lines of like Spielberg couldn't even. It took a while to get the green light. Maybe it was his most recent film that's gonna come out.
That West Side Story movie. He's been planning on doing that for years and years and years. That could have been it, but to my knowledge, I mean, I guess his movies are not gangbusters any longer at the box office. They do make money for his aging audience.
Yeah.
But they're not.
I think he needs to pull like what's his name? Clint Eastwood. You need to hyper target your aging audience, right? Because Clint Eastwood, he very much makes movies for the boomers and older.
Oh yeah,
right.
And they show up,
right? So it's always about, American Sniper, these guys that stopped a terrorist, all that jazz. Well, Spielberg needs to do that, and he's kind of doing that with West Side Story. So yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that. Look, The Post and
that is hitting his audience target.
Those. Yeah, and they were successful with that audience, and I think to the point where the studio was happy with it. So it's like he's not doing gangbusters any longer, but that's not at the place of his career where he's at any longer. To that point, we will say Spielberg has definitely had more fortune with getting the movies he wanting to make financed than Scorsese. He seems to have trouble getting anything made.
Yeah, but in the studio's defense, he keeps wanting to make these $200+ million films that are 5-hour long epics, which again, very much my cup of tea. But fuck, it's not the same as some of these other filmmakers. Not even West Side Story probably costs that much. When you're doing The Post, your most expensive asset is like what, Meryl Streep? Yeah,
your actors. It's your actors. Yeah, I mean, doing a period is expensive too, but I mean, costumes and makeup is.
How long before
budget.
He does his RBG movie?
I don't know. I was reading that he and Hillary Clinton had like a women's voting history program on TV recently. It's coming. Hillary Clinton, I think, produced it with Steven Spielberg. I don't know what. It's
Produced
not about her. It's about
by the
women's...
Clinton Foundation.
Oh, well, we know Spielberg is a member of the Clinton Foundation.
And the Illuminati.
But yeah, it's interesting. It'd be fun to get some recent comments of him of Poltergeist. It's been a while since he's mentioned the movie.
Apparently, from what I read, he's maintained to this day that is Tobe Hooper's film, not his.
Yeah, I don't think he would actually ever say what really went down. I think he's a gentleman. I mean, he's a professional too. We know. Like there were stories I read of how bad he got into fights with Julia Roberts on that Hook movie, and how she was like fired once or twice,
really?
But they all came back.
See,
she disappeared. I think
if that happened today, oof, the headlines.
There are a lot of Hollywood stories that if they happen today, the headlines. Could you imagine?
Well, I'm talking about the strictly legal shit. Like just walking off set, that's legal. But now...
Well, Shelley Long on The Shining?
No. But that, I'm talking about like... That in itself, like that's probably... I don't know, like maybe a police report needs to be filed in that case. I'm talking about shit where it's just messy behind the scenes shit, you know, screaming.
Well, there was Johnny Depp with the making of Pirates 5. He was reportedly always late and just in a bad mood. At that point, he and his wife were getting a divorce and they were having their own issues.
I mean, remember when we discussed the film, we're like, he's actually drunk. Like, what's going on? So yeah, we could tell.
And we may, depending if the reports are true, Pedro Pascal, Mandalorian. We might see some of that on the screen.
I doubt it. He's gonna have the helmet on the whole time.
That's true, huh? Yeah.
But the most famous one I can think of in recent memory was Terminator Salvation. What's his name? Christian Bale. Do you not know about this? There's a recording. When it came out, it was a big old scandal where I guess they're doing a scene. They're shooting it, and then one of the light guys came up. Maybe he came in shot to like mess with the lighting to fix it, make it better, whatever. While he was doing the scene, and he just fucking loses it. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck off my set." You know, and he just like goes at him. Like there's a point where it sounds like he was about to rush him and like try and beat the shit out of him. And it's like, and it's so funny. He's like, "You know what? You're a nice guy, but you don't know what the fuck you're doing. We are done professionally, man. We are done." Like, you never heard this recording?
No.
If you just Google it on, well, not Google it, just type it into YouTube, it'll pop up. But no, like it's him just losing his shit. And the thing is, I feel like this kind of shit happens all the time on Hollywood set. Like the lead actor punches the director or the director and then like they fucking go at it. I was reading an interview with Eddie Murphy talking about how him and John Landis, because he directed Coming to America, and I guess John Landis was like a real prick to him, and like they had this whole back and forth shit, and then like John Landis was really just being a real dick, like trying to put his foot down, like I'm the director, and just trying to belittle Eddie Murphy. And I can't remember at what point of another, like he just smacked the fuck out of him. And then he like completely changed his demeanor moving forward. But like it seems like hostile work environments are kind of the norm behind the scenes on Hollywood sets. But now it's like you have minor disagreements on the outcome of a film, and that's a fucking scandal, you know?
Well, I mean, there was a story recently that Will Ferrell and Jon Favreau didn't really get along when they're making Elf.
Yeah. I mean, now that I think of it, there's just hundreds where it's like one of the funniest is Wesley Snipes in Blade 3. Apparently, like, he only started to talk to the director through Post-it notes, and he would refuse to say his lines. There was a point where he's supposed to be laying down on a table while they're inspecting him, and he refused to open his eyes. So he would just lay there with his eyes closed, that they literally digitally had to put eyes on top of his closed eyes in Blade 3, and it looks creepy. And it's like, there's so many ridiculous stories of like the crazy shit that happens behind the scenes. But yeah, in today's day and age, fuck no, you can't do that. Because everyone will tweet that shit out, they'll record it, and then you're canceled in 2 seconds. Which, again, if you're being abusive, that's a good thing. But if you're just like having... It seems like a part of the artistic spark of movie making is just those clashes, you know? To a certain extent.
Far be it for me to say anything, because I've been but very little limited experience with any kind of production whatsoever, if it could even be called that word. But it just seems like, how could there not exist any kind of project where there wouldn't be any kind of differences of any kind?
Because you have the producers that want to be in charge, and the studios, they're like, we're bankrolling this, so they want to micromanage everything. You have the directors who are like, this is my fucking vision. You have the writers who are like, no, this is my fucking vision. So
bringing it back to Poltergeist, do you feel perhaps there could have been something like that going on with Tobe Hooper and with Steven Spielberg?
Maybe. From what it seems like, they were cool. But there could have been something along the lines of maybe the film was falling apart with Tobe, so then Steven just like came in and started taking over a lot of it.
But you also have situations like Return of the Jedi, where you had Richard Marquand, who was the director by name, but then George Lucas has admitted that he basically had to like do the day-to-day job as the director.
Yeah.
Kind of like making sure he was like not screwing things up. So it's like, it could be a situation which like Hooper and Spielberg just basically directed the film together, which by all indications, it seems like that's what happened.
Because Tobe Hooper is pretty talented, like very talented.
Right.
He's an icon. So the idea that he couldn't do the film, that doesn't necessarily make sense to me. By the way, he had died recently, and the Academy did not even put his name in the remembrance. When they do the remembrance.
It's bad enough when you completely dismiss horror as a genre. But you're really going to be that petty where you're going to ignore the people who dedicated their lives to the film industry because of the genre that they're associated in?
Horror.
This doesn't get enough, I think, blowback every year. But every year there is this by these very elitist groups of people from the Emmys or the Academy Awards, where they feel beholden to just snub people who are now dead in the ground. And every year there is blowback, but not enough, to the point where if there's any reform that should be done, and there is a lot of reform that should be done about everything about the Academy Awards, do not misunderstand me. But that is something that I cannot believe we continue to allow, is for people, just petty snobs, to just say, this dead person I don't like. We'll just pretend they never existed.
Or, realize that dramas aren't the only films that exist. Because, Toni Collette ain't dead, but she still got robbed of that Oscar nom and Oscar win. Yep. If she had given that same performance in, I don't know, like a fucking Louis Armstrong movie, I don't know. Just pick a random historic figure and make a drama about it. And she had given that same performance, she would have been a lock to win. Like, it wouldn't have even been close. Everyone would have been like, oh yeah, it's Toni Collette's. It's hers this year. But because it was a horror film, Hereditary what? Who? Toni Collette who? I don't know.
And again, it's all the industry accolade groups. Where was The Haunting of Hill House?
Yeah, when it came fucking Emmy time. Some of the best television. Fuck. Even horror's getting snubbed at the Emmys, and the Emmys rewards fucking trash. It's crazy. The Mandalorian, what did they win? 7? Oh no, they got nominated for 7, right? Or did they win 7?
They won 7 Emmy Awards.
Yeah, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. But Poltergeist, I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and it provided a bit of joy in this week of mine that had a lot of stress and anxiety to it. So, it was great fun.
Great start to Ghosttober.
Absolutely. Do you want to inform our lovely audience what they can expect for the next month?
Yes. So this was, of course, our first episode of Ghosttober. We have 2 more for here at To the Table. Next one will be M. Night Shyamalan's film debut. Technically it wasn't, but we will say that it was, because that's the way I like to think about it. Not Signs. The Sixth Sense. Classic ghost story. There's a twist in this film, and I'm not gonna give it away, Alexis.
Okay.
I know he knows the twist. It's hilarious. And then, well, everyone does at this point. And then we'll end it off with The Orphanage, Spanish film, produced by Guillermo del Toro. This is kind of the odd one out, because the other two are very, very famous American sort of ghost films. And The Orphanage is not really that famous. Maybe you might even consider it a bit of a cult classic. It's not that many people know of it. It's a Spanish film. But it's really good. It's really, really good. And Guillermo del Toro is, we believe, did you not say we might be getting into watching a lot of Guillermo del Toro movies soon? So yeah. So this, similar to this film, this one was not directed by Guillermo del Toro. It was produced, and I thought that might be a good sort of transition from Ghosttober to the eventual many reviews and discussions we will have on Guillermo del Toro's filmography. So that's sort of that tail end into that, to The Orphanage. Yeah. And then, of course, on the other shows, the main show, Red Spotlight Entertainment, we've already discussed The Haunting of Hill House, and then when The Haunting of Bly Manor comes out, when does that come out? October 9th. We will binge it and then come together and do another review with the Morenos, and probably not Kyle, because we're severely booked up as far as guests go. But he probably will be at the audio commentaries for The Shining and Doctor Sleep.
I told him months ago that we were planning on doing this, and since I've brought it up in conversation several times, as recently as yesterday, he has communicated to me no intention of appearing on any of these shows.
Okay, then never mind.
I just wanted to make sure there's like no hope of that happening.
The ghosts in these films. So yeah, that's
I mean, he hasn't said that, he hasn't definitively closed the door on it, but he also hasn't bothered to address their existence. So I guess that's kind of where he is with this.
Yeah, he's dead to us. That's okay.
Well, thank you all for listening. This is a very fascinating conversation here for Poltergeist Onto the Table. Stay tuned every Wednesday for more episodes, as well as our Red Spotlight podcast every single Sunday, sometimes on Thursdays, and the Fantasy Fair every single Friday. Thank you all. Stay here under our Spotlight Network, and until next time, bye-bye.